Cool. Cool. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. This is really exciting. You know, I've read here a few times before, but this one I'm particularly excited about because even though I missed most of Rob Emmett's reading, Rob's my uncle, my mom's younger brother, and it's the first time that I've gotten to hear you read, obviously because it's the first time you've read your songs as
learn to read.
just learn to read, yes. So it's great. It's a real great opportunity and a great honor to be able to share the stage with my uncle. We'll have to do this.
Vice versa.
Do this more. So and a lot of my family's here. My grandfather's here, having recently moved from Indianapolis. My aunt Marcy, my eldest aunt. My mom is here again, and some friends of mine as well, John and Curtis and Mary and Dave, and let's see who else. These lights are killing me. Steve's here, and Linda, and a whole bunch of people. Teresa and Lisa, and then Jessica Lopez Lyman is here, all the way from Santa Barbara, California.
All right.
She and I are going to kind of do a round robin kind of thing, and we've got an experimental, never been attempted before in the United States, as far as I know. Kind of surprised that we're going to pull you all into and see if we can pull it off. We just concocted this crazy idea last night or today, and we'll see if we can actually make it work. It's hard to tell. You might be wondering why the heck I look like I look. It's because I'm dead. I died almost 100 years ago. No, I just emceed the Day of the Dead celebration at the Fort Wayne Museum of Art on Main Street. For those of you that don't know, Day of the Dead is a long-standing holiday that's very popular in Mexico and in other Latin American countries. It is sort of this hybrid fusion of the Spanish Catholic Church and the indigenous traditions of Mexico and Central America, wherein once a year, according to the beliefs, the dead come back to be amongst the living, and it's a celebratory time. It's a time of reflection and paying tribute to the dead and making offerings to the dead. It's become a very Mexican holiday. And so the Art Museum has now, for 2 years running, hosted a celebration, and I've emceed it the last couple of years. So that's why I look like this. This is part of the celebration. You get dressed up, and you can see Teresa is here in her Katrina outfit as well. This particular outfit is Emiliano Zapata, who was one of the leaders of the Mexican Revolution in about 100 years ago, basically. He was a peasant farmer, indigenous peasant farmer who led the people against the Porfirio Diaz dictatorship and eventually overthrew the dictatorship to set up a democratic government. He was unfortunately assassinated before the end of the revolution. But he's widely popular in Mexico. If you've studied Mexican history, you probably have come across him in those history books. So this was my little nod to Emiliano Zapata. Anyway, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to take turns doing a poem. My poems tend to be longer than Jessica's, I think, so she might do a couple of them to my one, and then we'll get into this. We're calling it Lucha Libro. So, you know what that means, be warned. I want to share just this quick quote with you all, because I know that Jessica said it's overplayed, but it's reflective of the Dia de los Muertos sentiment that we're celebrating. It's a quote by Mexican writer, intellectual Octavio Paz. He says, "To the people of New York, Paris, or London, death is a word that is never pronounced because it burns the lips. The Mexican, however, frequents it, jokes about it, caresses it, sleeps with it, celebrates it. It is one of his favorite toys and most steadfast love. Of course, in his attitude, perhaps there is as much fear as there is in one of the others, but at least he does not hide it. He confronts it. He confronts it face to face with patience, disdain, or irony." This first poem that I want to read is an older poem, and when I heard that my grandfather was coming, I knew I wanted to read this poem because he's in the poem. If I can find it. My eyes, when you die, your eyesight gets really bad. Your eyes start to decay.
I have some readers for dead people if you would like some.
You have readers for dead people? You don't have ears on your skull, so I don't have any way to hold them up. Jessica, you do have my glasses, all right? Let me see.
I like your hair, dude.
It was kind of, Jessica even commented, she said it was kind of scary how much we looked alike when the flyer came out. And I'm, what, 20-some years younger than you? Thanks, Jessica. So one of the things that I very fondly remember as a child was my grandparents lived in Indianapolis. My grandfather, Robert Emmett, and my grandmother, Peggy Flaherty Emmett, lived in Indianapolis, and it was always a real treat to get to go down and visit them. And I think one year I went down for spring break. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but this is one of the things you take poetic license, you kind of get to create the story. So I was 12, we'll say I was 12. And they ran this program called Beggars for the Poor. I don't know if you want to say anything about it or not, but it was, they worked providing basic necessities for homeless people in Indianapolis. And you know, over the years I've lived in major cities, and you see homeless people out on the streets, you know, and they ask you for change, or they're visible. I think that's one of the most tragic and unfortunate things about a country that is this rich, allegedly, that we have not found a way to take care of some of the poorest people. But this was my grandparents' efforts to do so, and I have this very vivid recollection of this experience, at least vivid to me. So I wrote this poem about this man that I remember encountering when we went one day to provide some of these provisions for the homeless folks. It's called Eugene, that was his name. I was a 12-year-old stick figure of a boy. He was a mountain of a man, larger than the city's skyline. I still find myself searching for Eugene, somewhere in this small world of big cities. It was spring break to some, to others just another day lived out in slow motion. I was a 12-year-old stick figure of a boy. He was a mountain of a man. I have long since forgotten the details of his face, lost it in the puddled streets of Indianapolis. It became a blur in the shadow of monuments to soldiers and sailors that anchor the city's downtown, sending streets to a swirling end. The memory of his face drowned in the flooded banks of the White River where he slept at night. It disappeared in the shadows of the overpass, the freeway between this city and every home I've ever had. I lost the memory of his face somewhere in the passing windows of a teenager's brain in transit between boyhood and manhood, but I could never forget his name, Eugene. Could never shake it, despite all the other names I have ever known and lost, I have spoken and ignored. Can't remember the names of all my cousins, friends, lovers, school teachers, co-workers. Sometimes I can't unearth my own name, but I can't forget his. Eugene. Can't remember the last time I ever said the word aloud, Eugene, or ever told anyone I remembered, just carried it with me like my last worldly possession, like a concealed weapon. I was a 12-year-old stick figure of a boy. He was an old mountain of a man in a city that swallowed him and spit me out. This spring break, a visit to the grandparents, a week of independence, and the one thing I was most excited about was not the museums, going out to eat, the hip uncle who played bass guitar and listened to U2, The Who, and Elvis Costello, or Grandma's peach pie. It was the homeless people who floated through the city streets as light and relevant as yesterday's newspaper. My imagination reminds me that it rained that morning, that it was sticky humid that day, that the city's skyline loomed in the distance, that this back alley smelled like pee, the kind of smell 12-year-old boys get a kick out of. My imagination tells me that they were all waiting there for us, like something out of a Ray Bradbury movie I would see years later. Hungry, glazed eyes waiting for the accident to arrive. My grandparents and I, disguised as beggars for the poor, in a white van, Charity's chariot, stuffed with second-hand clothing, men's suits, socks whiter than mine had ever been, underwear, collared shirts a 12-year-old kid wouldn't be caught dead in, stuffed with sandwiches, coffee, razors, and soap, stuffed with the ghost of 100,000 Hail Marys, Our Fathers, the Apostles' Creed, a 12-year-old stick figure of a boy, and two white-haired Irish elders, the poster children for charity. I was a 12-year-old stick figure of a boy. He was a mountain of a man. He cradled his cup of coffee closely, as if the whole world were a monkey on his shoulder trying to snatch it from him. The black of his swollen fingers across the white of his cup, a checkerboard without kings. His skin, the black of Mississippi summers or Detroit factory floors. Eugene carried every worldly possession in his once-upon-a-time white, now soiled brown duffel bag, called it home, yet no cops ever needed a search warrant when breaking and entering in search of concealed weapons. It was a humid day, rain clouds threatening as those beat cops, shop owners, the common cold. But Eugene wore a deep blue woolen trench coat reminiscent of a dignified historical figure, a Union soldier from the 1st Black Regiment, exactly the kind of figure missing from the city's monuments. He stuffed a head full of hair, a tangled bush with more naps than a kindergarten class, into a knit cap, stiff with sweat, rose in a series of sways, shuffled down the alley, invisible, unnoticed, like a human snuffleupagus, past the open-door garage where a tiny radio blasted a tinny version of Al Green's Let's Stay Together. And I swear I heard him say, "That's all I'm trying to do. All I'm trying to do." Now, some 20 years later, I still find myself searching for Eugene in the reflection and puddles, searching for Eugene not in the hungry glazed eyes, but in the stony stares of statues, not in the outheld hands, but those wrapped tightly around themselves. I still find myself searching for Eugene somewhere in this small world of big cities.
How's everyone doing?
Yeah, well,
Great. I'm a stander, not a sitter.